Hey, book lovers, or should I say lovers of romance books. My name is Jalissa, a fellow reader and romance enthusiast, ready to give you more than just a synopsis. Last episode, we talked about a series called From Blood and Ash, a six-book series that helped me discover a new genre of reading and pulled me from a reading slump. This episode, we're going to talk about another romantic book and series that is also high fantasy, but this book was written by one of my favorite authors, and I think most romantic fantasy fanatics would say the same about Sarah J. Maas. If you don't know who Sarah J. Maas is, just know she is like the Taylor Swift of romantic fantasy writing. There are even theories that Taylor Swift has written songs about Sarah J. Maas's books within her just released album Midnights. But Taylor Swift isn't the only one. I will warn you, the song I'm about to mention has some explicit content, so if you do decide to listen to the song, listener discretion is advised. There is another artist by the name of Russ who wrote a song called Nasty, and he subtly included the name of the book that I'm talking about today in his song. The lyric goes, "But I don't care if I get hurt, every rose has thorns." Russ dedicated that entire song to the book talk community and the books that are currently talked about by the book talk community. And one of the most popular books in the book talk community to this day is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, also known as ACOTAR, hence the Every Rose Has Thorns. I'm going to be calling A Court of Thorns and Roses ACOTAR throughout this entire episode, so be warned, I'm going to say it a lot. The name ACOTAR is not only the name of the first book, but it is also used to refer to the entire book series. This episode will not contain spoilers, but will give you general information about the plot and the characters. So Sarah J. Maas's backstory is fascinating because of how young she was when she started writing as an author. She was 16 years old when she wrote her first book, called Throne of Glass, and it became a series later. She posted the first seven chapters of Throne of Glass onto fictionpress.com, which was a popular free website at the time for amateur authors to allow readers to have access to their content. Shortly after that, she realized the book's potential and the growth in popularity and officially published Throne of Glass with Bloomsbury Publications in 2010. The Throne of Glass series is one of the most popular fantasy series in the world. I am not exaggerating. I myself have read the series, and believe me, it is worth the hype. Since then, Sarah J. Maas has written one complete series, which is Throne of Glass, and has two in the works, which are Crescent City and the last books of ACOTAR. Sarah J. Maas is a New York Times bestselling author and number one international bestselling author. From 2016 to 2021, Sarah was ranked sixth best author on Goodreads. She has sold over 13 million copies of her books, not including ebooks, and has been published in 36 languages. There is an entire fandom dedicated to Sarah J. Maas, Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, and Crescent City, all separate fandoms, might I add. I have chosen to talk about ACOTAR over Sarah J. Maas's other series because I read ACOTAR first before Throne of Glass. I categorize Throne of Glass and ACOTAR in two different places in my mind. That being said, I don't see Throne of Glass as a romantic fantasy series. Yes, there are romantic concepts in it, but it is mostly high fantasy and its focus is strictly fantasy. Avatar, on the other hand, is an adult high fantasy romance book. Also, ACOTAR has a very special place in my heart. It's the first book where I sat back after I was done with the series and admitted to myself of a shift in a perspective, a reading perspective. ACOTAR gave me high expectations for every book I read after that. No matter what book I picked up and read, I always compared it to Sarah J. Maas's writing style, her world building, and the way she can invoke emotions. There was a video I saw on social media a while back that said, "Not a day goes by where I don't think about one of Sarah J. Maas's books." For me, this is true. I even plan to get a tattoo dedicated to Akatar as soon as I finalize when I'm getting it, which will for sure be after I graduate. Now that I have hyped up the book, let's go ahead and talk about it. Akatar is the first book in the series, running 448 pages. There are five written books total in the series, and one that is currently being written. Akatar was written in 2009. However, Sarah J. Maas didn't publish Akatar until 2015. Since then, the book has been popular with millions of readers worldwide. The cover of the Akatar series books have gone through two renditions. The original cover, which I had not seen before I looked it up, was changed because it gave away too much about the book's plot. I actually agree with this. When I looked it up, I felt that it spoiled some important information, and if I had not read it before seeing the cover, I would have been reluctant to read it afterwards. Also, I really love the current covers. They're simplistic and eye catching. All her Akatar books have bright color covers and a different symbol on the front. I'm not going to explain anything about the cover besides who they were designed by. The first set was created by a freelance artist, digital artist named Adrian Dadich. As far as the second cover artist, I couldn't find who Sarah J. Maas hired to create the new covers. I saw an article about it being AI, but I also saw another article about it being designed by a tattoo artist, which, if you ever see the covers, you can see how that's understandable. But I couldn't find anything with factual evidence of who created them. But either way, the changing of the covers actually attracted a broader audience. Sarah J. Maas mentioned in several interviews that Akatar is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. The book does contain aspects that resemble Beauty and the Beast, but it is not the exact same. I use the word resemble loosely. There is one part that I think stems from Beauty and the Beast, which I will talk about later. The book is set in a more progressive medieval time, meaning there are things like running water, electrical lights, plumbing, etc. However, everything is explained as being run by magic. So there isn't a discorrelation between time period and modern day invention. You're still allowed to feel as though it's believable and understandable. As far as the magic system, the basis is there are fairies, otherwise known as fae, who have magic. These beings are physically what you think of when you think about fairies, so pointy ears, sometimes wings, but they are not small in size. They are regular sized like humans, but the book doesn't represent the fairies as whimsical or fairy tale like. There is a common misconception with what fae are. People hear fairy and think it's going to feel juvenile or kiddish. But remember, this is an adult high fantasy. This book was written for adults, so you won't feel out of place when reading it. As you finish the first book, you'll see fairies or fae in a different light. So, just to reiterate, magic is only contained by Fae. The types of powers that the Fae have depend on where their place of origin is, and I will explain that in a bit. The main character's name and the protagonist of the story, the heroine, is named Farah Archern. So there's a common trend about Sarah J. Maas's character names. There are memes about Sarah J. Maas hitting the keyboard when she comes up with her character names because a lot of the names are spelled abnormally and are hard to pronounce. Feyre is the first example of this throughout the series. Feyre is spelled Feyre. When I read the book for the first time, I assumed it said fairy, which is a pun on words with the plot, but I was wrong. And I was reading it wrong in my head for the longest time. Feyre is human. She is described as having brown hair, bluish green eyes. She's very thin, which is an important detail. She has two sisters. She's the youngest of the three. Her other sisters' names are Nesta and Elaine. They don't make much of appearance in the first book, but later in the series you will learn more about them. Her mother died when she was young and her father is alive, but her father is injured in his leg, which is another important detail. Within the first chapters of the book, you learn about Feyre's fear of fairies and her role as a caretaker to her family. The only sole provider is what she is. And you will find out why within the first couple of chapters. The book starts out by Feyre hunting in the woods. It's deep into winter and her family is starving. She sees a deer in the distance and quickly learns that the deer is not only being hunted by her, but also by a wolf nearby. The wolf and herself make eye contact after she watches it for some time. She feels strange about it and questions it, although her family is hungry, so she shoots the wolf. The wolf turns out to be a shape shifting fae. It's not a coincidence since she does live close to the fairylands, right on the territory line, but she didn't know the wolf was fae when she shot it. However, not that long later, a friend of the wolf, who's also fae, finds Feyre and threatens to kill her entire family. Feyre pleads with him, begs him not to, and he makes a deal with her that if she comes to the fairylands, then he will forgive her. She agrees and goes with him immediately after. Feyre's world instantly flips upside down from then on. That part of the story is what is considered the Beauty and the Beast retelling, where she gets taken out of her home and stays with the quote unquote beast. Before I get into a bit more about the other characters, I'm going to talk about the fairylands because it's one of my favorite details of the books. The land is called Pryrethian and it's split into 7 sections. The sections represent a different court, as in royal courts in a monarchy. Each court is named after a time of day or a season. So, just to list them for reference, there is spring court, summer court, autumn court, and winter court, dawn court, day court, and night court. The court's name represents how the court physically looks. If you want to see some cool illustrated artwork, even if you're not going to read the book, I recommend going to TikTok and searching Akatar courts. There are so many collages that people have made about them, and there are some that really depict the courts so well. As you read, you will learn more about the physical traits of every court. It's important to know as well that every court has a High Lord. I see it as a ruler of that portion of the land. There are 7 High Lords in total. You will learn more about them as you read. Remember, I said that the powers a Fae have vary depending on where they are from? This is what I meant. Every court has certain powers, and that will reflect into what Fae live there. The next character I want to introduce is Tamlin. Tamlin is a Fae that makes a deal with Feyre to come back to the fairylands. He is described as being blonde, blue-eyed, pointy ears, and tall. He is the High Lord of the Spring Court. He looks over the land and takes care of the people. His power is the ability to shapeshift just like the wolf Feyre killed. And for some weird reason, he is wearing a mask that he can't take off. Actually, his entire court and the residents who live in the spring court are also wearing masks that they can't take off. I can't say much besides that without giving it away, but you quickly find out that Tamlin is Feyre's love interest, but I promise you that is not a spoiler. Tamlin is based loosely on an old fairy ballad from the borderlands of Scotland called Tamlin. Sarah J. Maas likes to get her stories from old folk tales and ballads and different kinds of um, folklore. So that's where most of that comes from. But this particular tale, Tamlin's ballad, the tale talks about a woman who meets a mysterious man in the forest. I didn't know this until recently that she took from this ballad, but I did read the ballad and it actually reminds me of the book or the plot more than Beauty and the Beast. But Akatar is still more of its own story than anything, even if she did pull parts of it from old folk tales. You meet another character named Lucian. He has red hair, brown eyes, pointy ears, although something you should know about Lucian is he has a fake eye. I had a hard time imagining the fake eye, but it does play into the plot surprisingly. He is Tamlin's best friend, his right hand man, and helps to run the spring court. Lucian is originally from Auderncourt and he has six other brothers. His power is the ability to wield fire. Lucian helps Feyre throughout her transition into the fairylands. He is a friend to her and a mentor and is there for her when she needs it. I am going to stop there with characters. Those three characters make up a lot of the first book. Don't get me wrong, there are other characters that are important, though the three I mentioned are enough to give you a general understanding of what to expect. The other characters that come into play are not highlighted as much in the book, and telling you about them will give too much away, and I don't want to spoil this book for you. So you can assume how Feyre is feeling about her travels to Pyrethian, even after getting used to her transition. I mean, she was basically kidnapped against her will. But as the story progresses, events take place that change the direction of the entire plot. Sarah J. Maas does an amazing job of creating a flat storyline and subtly adding to it and molding her scenes to create a big, unexpected ending. And this book very much has that in there. I will say that Akatar is set up for the entire series. If you get through the first book, which to me is the least appealing one, then you will fly through the others. Like I said, this book is to build foundation. The first book in the Akatar series is fast paced and it may feel rushed. When you finish the book, you might question what else can be written, because believe me, I did. After reading all the books that have been written so far, I understand why Akatar was written the way it was written. Even the love story threw me off guard in the first book because I am a big romantic girly and I wanted slow burn and, a lot of tension. But believe me, things are not what they seem. But the following books are the ones that really imprint on people. They're memorable, filled with plot twists, and you become immersed into a story of love, family, friends, strength, and courage. I promise you, if you are a romantic fantasy reader, these books will change your life if you haven't already read them. Akatar is a series I think every fantasy romance reader should read at least once. Sarah J. Maas is an applauded author, and her writing is passion filled. I would not speak so highly of her if I didn't feel so strongly towards her writing. To end this episode, I'm going to reveal one of my favorite quotes from the book, which is one of her most popular quotes in the entire series. It's kind of like a staple for this book series, and you will see it a lot if you look it up online. This particular quote, it goes, "To the people who look at the stars and wish, to the stars who listen, and the dreams that are answered." Oh, I just got chills. I love that quote. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Tune in next episode as we will be taking a dive into a book that turns a Greek mythology tale into a romance like no other. All I have to say is bye, book lovers, or should I say lovers of romance books. My name is Jalissa, and that was the Paperback Podcast. Thank you for listening.